Welcome, board game soloists. It's your boy, Jalen Riker, horror author and board game fanatic. So, with the cost of freighting games around the world getting higher and higher to the point where I feel like it's getting pretty irrational, and then with the niche aspect of our hobby making everything cost multiple times what they would need to if they were mainstream products with proper economies of scale, I've gotten really into making things at home. I know that a lot of people enjoy crafting as part of the hobby and have for a very long time. But one thing that's really on the rise and that I have a lot of fun with is 3D printing. Now, while resin is popular for printing miniatures, PLA printing has actually gotten better and better and is definitely good enough for accessories and terrain. And honestly, I think it's good enough for some thick minis. I'll show you what I mean a little bit later. So this is part of my whole thought on print and play. Like, I really feel like we are going in a direction where it could become commonplace to print a lot more of your game at home and ship a lot less of your game super long distances. So first thing that we obviously need to talk about are 3D printers. Now, for a long time, they've been very finicky. I still feel like they are a bit of a hobbyist product. There is still some work that you need to put into learning how to use them and how to calibrate them. But I bought a 3D printer with an auto leveling print bed, which is probably the most finicky part of 3D printing. So the print bed will flatten itself perfectly compared to the print head. And this was something that used to be a lot of trouble. And I purchased this filament printer for $180, shipped, taxes, everything. That is a really good price, and I have gotten way more than my money's worth out of this product. The filament that works best with my printer costs about $15 per kilogram or 2.2 pound spool. You can make a lot of minis and like dungeon furniture with 2.2 pounds of filament. So let's go ahead. These aren't in any given order from like my best thing that I printed to my worst. I'm just going through some categories. And the first category today is dice towers. So the reason I'm putting this first is because this is the first accessory that sent me down this 3D printing for board games rabbit hole. I was looking for dice towers and kept finding them for about $20. And I mean, I kept looking around and I just couldn't believe that they didn't come cheaper than that. Like, it's something that would cost, say, $3 if it was, a common product. Nothing of the size and complexity of something like this should be $20. But I mean, that's the hobby that I've chosen. But then I thought, I wonder if anybody designed these for 3D printers. And boy, have they. This is one of the first ones that I printed. And it sounds like a freaking machine gun. To the point where I can't actually use this one if anybody is home. This one's so loud, I can actually drive myself crazy with it. But it is a really cool one. I like it a lot. This is one that isn't super practical because it's got a very small bed that it lands on. And honestly, it doesn't roll things like, so 6 sides kind of are okay. But this is the sort of thing where you want to get some velocity going down on it, and you really can't because it's so narrow. Now, anything with more sides than 6 goes down that, rolls around that. This is just fine. But I actually printed this out, and it looks so nice. I put it on a shelf in the living room, and my wife thought that it was just a sculpture. She didn't realize. She thought I was just 3D printing something cool. She didn't realize that it was I had fooled her into storing one of my board game accessories in the room. Of course, I told her soon after, and she demanded that I remove it. No, I'm just kidding. This is a nice one. It has a bed, and I only recently found out exactly that you can lower these super easy without in Cura, and you don't even have to edit it to chop off like the bottom layer. So I absolutely would have chopped this off, but it works really well. It's just it lands a little bit loud, but not bad. So as you can see, what I did was I saved myself, because these I use about $2 worth of plastic a piece, maybe a little more for some, like for one like this uses a lot of plastic, less for one like this, which uses a very little amount of plastic because it's so hollow. So I saved myself, $18 by making one of these for $2 instead of for buying one for 20, and then I made 10 of them. So it ended up costing me $20. Do you hear that? Whisper quiet. The only thing is that you've got to do that in a dice tray and then move it aside. This one's also nice and quiet, and I think does a really good job of randomizing it. Again, it's one that you have to pick up and move aside. Gosh, look at this. Like, you print it like this. You don't print it in two pieces. You print it like this, and the little tiny bit of filament that connects the two different pieces just breaks away when you open it for the first time. So cool. This works great for 6-sided dice. This is one of my favorites. It actually also looks so nice. It's on a high shelf where you can't really see that it's a castle. I really like that one. You can just scoot everything up. And then this is maybe my favorite. I definitely always use it when I'm playing Masters of the Universe. Printed it in green, so it looks like Castle Grayskull. They have some Castle, you can find some Castle Grayskull dice towers online, but they are so expensive. This is one of my favorites, though. I think it randomizes really well. It's quiet because it's got a sort of a loop instead of clacking back and forth, and it folds up very neatly. So that was our first 3D printed item. Let's look at our next. We have printed some dice towers, so why don't we print some dice? Oh, I know why. Because dice are one of the less niche items in our hobby. Role-playing games are very popular, so even what used to be kind of hard to find sets of your standard role-playing dice are now cheap, and of course 6-sided dice are practically free. Yeah, I mean, that's true. And this isn't necessarily the most practical thing in the world, but you know what I don't like? I don't like the way that these caltrops roll. They just don't roll, especially if you're using a dice tower. You know what roll really nice? These 4-sided dice. They're great. I've got some fudge dice here. These are pretty expensive to buy a set, but they're very cheap to print. Tired of having to calculate 2-sided dice, but don't want to flip a coin? Look at this. This thing's so cool. I mean, I didn't print this for any practical purposes. It's just neat. Here's another crazy design for a 4-sided die. And here's, you tired of having to split a roll on a D6 in half to get a D3? Well, here's a D3. So, these aren't perfectly balanced. They're probably more novelty than anything, but if I ever play a solo RPG that requires fudge dice, I definitely will use these. I promise you that. And the main thing is that they keep you amused for a little bit, right? So I mentioned miniatures earlier, and how maybe with a filament printer that maybe you wouldn't be able to print miniatures to your liking. They're certainly not like what comes from the best companies. They're not even what you can get out of a resin printer, but this is nearly down to a 1-inch scale. This little skeleton is down to the little skeleton pilot. Got a gas can, little flight cap, World War I pilot. And I think that they look good. They are good enough for me. Now, I have designed these with an online program called Titancraft. You have to buy a lot of the accessories, like you get some packs, and these are ones that I created for use in Forbidden Psalm: The Last War, which is a trench war that has just goes on for all of eternity. You can't escape the poisonous gas. You can't find a way out of the trenches. Little bleak, huh? And so I started making some. I bought the steampunk pack on Titancraft because I saw like some gas masks and trench coats and these packs, and I thought, you know what? I bet I could. I bet I could make some that would go really good with these. And I think that I succeeded. I definitely succeeded to my own standard. Minis are, probably one of the weaker points on for filament printers, but I really like how these turn out. I crank the thickness up on just every body part. I make the mini as big as it can fit on the base. I think that these are also going to be really good for using with Steampunk Saga, Brett Nugent's um, game that's on Kickstarter in February 2024. Might be running now if I get this video out soon enough. Uh, these look steampunky enough, I think. I also made a bunch of maxi minis. This one shows one of the strengths, one of the things that you can do well with filament printers, which if you can make them supportless, um, you can buy files that are made to be printed supportless. It prints from the bottom up, and so it needs to have something to set the next layer on. Like you notice how his gun is angled at an upward angle, and how his hand is right against his thigh. Now these are blown up to the point where it actually does cause some issues with the filament drooping. But if it was printed at the size it was intended, this is from Ill-Gotten Games. Dutch Mogul is the main designer's name over on Thingiverse, but Ill-Gotten Games has a lot of Kickstarters. I've purchased several of them. Here's another one. Can be built without supports. It's creepy. So these I printed for. So these I printed for this game, Doomed. It's apocalyptic horror hunting. So I'm thinking of it kind of like a grim version of Monster Hunter. Monster Hunter is absolutely one of my all-time favorite games. I've put thousands of hours into it, and you can see that with these larger minis, you can get some really, like I take smaller ones and I blow them up, and you can get some really good results. Now here is one that still has its supports that I printed without a base. So I'm going to have to print a base for it, and I'm going to have to break these supports off. These look actually very easy to come off, but that's one of the reasons why you can't use very many weapons on Titancraft models, because most of them are skinny enough that they will absolutely snap off. Like if you were to see me design one of these, you would say, wow, these are some thick weapons. And you can see that these are not thick. This is fragile. One other thing you can do is, if you're rebasing, you can make bases. And then you get to make them any color that you like, any thickness that you like, any texture. It can be cobblestone, it can be brick, it can be wood. And you can rebase your minis, and these cost basically pennies. So I know what a bunch of people are rushing to their keyboards to say, and that is that they really love minis, and they find that these aren't good enough. And you know what? I think that is totally valid. I have no problem with that. It's just that you don't have to say it. It's not so. I'm not saying this to be like mean or anything, but it's not very I don't think that the compromises that you can't make, and I certainly have compromises that I can't make. Like I can't feel the same playing a digital game as I do playing a board game. So that's one that's just going to cost me money, and I just have to live with it. I think that the compromises that you can't make aren't as interesting as the compromises that you can make for other people, because those challenge my assumptions about what I really can't do without. I think that these are things that we're going to have to ask ourselves as we go forward in this expensive hobby that just keeps getting more expensive, and is certainly I think it's almost guaranteed it's pricing people out. I know that I can't buy the mini heavy games that I used to. Do I absolutely need minis? No, I actually like standees quite a bit. But these are fun. This is like another hobby, an adjacent hobby, and I print out miniatures that are good enough for me. So one thing that I've got to be honest is you're going to get things that mess up. So my filament printer has a track that the print bed runs along as it's moving. As it's drawing, the head doesn't move, it's the bed that moves. And the track, for some reason, is in two pieces. So you've got the front half and the back half, and it slides along it. I don't know why it was designed like that. It's annoying. But sometimes when it hits the joining part, the part where those two pieces of track join, it jumps. Now, if I'm thinking I can fit something this size on one half of the bed, and it won't do that. The wheels bed wheels won't ever roll over that part. But if I'm not paying attention and I put it right in the middle where it defaults to, then yeah, it'll hit that point and it'll jump. And you can see that I actually broke the head off and re-glued it. But just to let you know, it's not all sunshine and roses, and this is still a hobbyist sort of endeavor. I think that in the future, it's going to be much more plug and play, and I think that it is actually pretty plug and play right now. But you're going to have failed prints, and you're going to have some manual tweaking that you're going to have to figure out. One place where I feel like it's undeniable that a filament printer will save you a bunch of money is with 3D terrain. This stuff is just normally so expensive. Now, I could just go get a rock from outside, I guess, but I like that this one's been designed with some flat points. Maybe a rock's not the best example of how this will save you money. But how about these dungeon rooms? This is Modulheim, and I paid like $10 to $15. And I printed so much of this and just saved literally hundreds of dollars on the cost of building terrain. Some of it's like broken down. It's great to go in the middle of big skirmish battlefields. You've got printed with different number of doorways, just depending on what you want. I like Modulheim. In the second series, he made these 1-inch grid. So these are 4 inches or 10 centimeters. So they will fit perfectly around a 3x3. Or if you're not letting anyone go inside of it, they fit perfectly within a 4x4. He made these grids, which you could use for floors, which I use for ceilings, or roofs. So when an archer goes up on top of a building, you can still count how far they're moving without having to measure. Just so much freaking cool stuff. It stacks. I'm going to show some pictures. Oh, here's some ramparts. So you could have. So these really show you that some games are really just big toy boxes, right? So here are some ramparts. You can have your guys go up here, stand back there behind cover, and take fire from an elevated position. I mean, look at this. Now these took a significant amount of filament to print. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. I'm not going to lie. But they are so much cheaper than any plastic terrain, and they're comparably priced to paper terrain that you can buy, to the point where if I can't get a rule set without the terrain, I just won't play that game. And it might be to my loss, but you know what? I have a ton of rule sets that I haven't played yet. So I don't usually use these for setting up dungeons because it takes just too long for my taste. I usually will use Loke Battle Mats books, which I'll show sometime. And Those do a really good job. But for any sort of like skirmish, big skirmish game across the table, I'll set up trees. I'll set up these. I'll set up my rocks, which could have come from outside. Here's some tents. And this, oh man, I absolutely love these. And these, I think, were free. That's the thing. People just love the hobby of designing this so much that they will, a lot of things, I know I paid for Modulheim, but it was such a low price for what I got. But and a lot of things are free. I mean, look at that. Put your archer up there. I use these alongside these. It's like a bridge system. How do you get up on those? Well, got one of these alongside of it. We've also got ladders that can prop up against it. Just a bunch of toys. If you like 3D terrain and you don't want to craft it yourself, then a 3D printer is absolutely the way to go. I personally don't. I think that it's awesome watching people craft 3D terrain. It's just not part of my hobby time. So making videos is, um, playing games, and the 3D printer allows me to have the hobby of making terrain without spending almost any time actually doing it. Also, the nice thing about this stuff is I literally just toss it into a bag. I've got a giant reusable bag that holds all of my dungeon rooms that I can't fit underneath the camera. But I mean, I don't have to worry about any of this getting hurt. I put a dark wash on it so you can see the bricks, and that won't rub off. It's gesso, it's just black gesso. So it's super stable on there, and it's also deep in the crevices. And I mean, I can just absolutely chuck this stuff around. So one type of terrain which can absolutely save you a ton of money is dungeon furniture. Just because it is so cheap to print, it requires so little plastic that you can just print almost infinitely on a spool, and because it's, so expensive to buy. So while I like standees perfectly well, pretty much as minis, especially human-sized minis, I really do like 3D dungeon furniture. It really does change the feel of a dungeon crawler for me to have this on the tiles. You can put a little person in there. When I play 5 Leagues and I'm rescuing someone, they'll be inside of this little cage in the middle of the map. You've got to have your barrels and your crates, right? Got them separated out, and all these designs were free. So it's just pennies to print the worth of plastic. It's just pennies worth of plastic to print them. When you play objectives, games that have objectives, and you need objective markers, like, what's cooler than these, like, torches? And then also I have some that have the objectives hidden on the underside of them, which are really useful for when it's supposed to be randomized and you don't know what you're running up against. So here, if I'm playing in a mine, I've got little mine carts. I've got crypts, or sarcophagi, evil altar. Here's all my graveyard stuff. This makes so atmospheric. And then I've got unflocked trees that I use for dead trees. And you've just got all these gravestones printed for cents a piece. You've got little tiny mausoleums. You've got like statues. You've got skulls and dirt. Got a bunch of ladders. Bubbling lava. A well. All this stuff 3D printed for almost nothing. Bed, a bunch of different treasure chests, just like so many treasure chests. Bookshelves, empty bookshelves. All the different sorts of treasure chests you could want. So the last examples I'm going to give of terrain are terrain that I actually use instead of buying the terrain for games. I have this bag set aside specifically to play Oathsworn with. These are the walls. These are the tree trunks. Some of those buildings that I showed earlier from Motschelheim are really good. They're exactly the same size as the houses. When I found out that the hexes, I love Masters of the Universe and I love the terrain that they made for it, but the rocks, it was like $40 for sets of cliff sets. And when I found out that they were the same exact size as the hexes from HeroQuest and somebody made them to perfectly mimic the Motu Clash for Eternia rocks, I printed those out and I sold I sold those and got them back. I got my money back for them. Okay, but let's say that you are sitting there smugly saying, but I'm not an Ameritrash miniatures wargaming dungeon crawler player. Okay, I don't need any of this stuff. I'm just going to use my imagination and play my Euro games. I say, okay, cool. But no matter what, like me, if you have a small table like I do, you need to have things to wrangle your pieces. And piece wrangling accessories are ridiculously expensive. Now, I have a 33-inch card table. My lack of space can take a game from fun to painful. And the 3D printing community is so clever for the things that they've come up with. These right here may not look like much, but what they do is they hold onto your health dials. So now I use these health trackers a lot. And now instead of laying down and taking up all that space, or like, especially if you're using the bigger ones like from Gloomhaven, that is a ton of space. Not anymore. And now you can change the number without having to pick them up. So useful. Maybe not use them upside down, but you get the idea. Space saving. Yeah, those dishes that magnetize and click together, those things can cost like $10 a piece. They make them even with little spaces in it, so you can just buy little button magnets. I don't have them because I use silicone little cupcake molds. Look at this. You can print your entire health dial. You don't even have to have extras. I've got a bunch of extras because I have a bunch of Eon's End and such and Marvel Champions. One good thing about playing solo is that you can take the pieces for the other players and pull them out and use them in general games and not worry about whether or not they're going to get lost or damaged. So speaking of Marvel Champions, that I used to play that game true solo, and it can be punishing playing it true solo. It doesn't work. Definitely does not work with every hero against every villain. I mean, it's tough. But when I use these to hold my cards up, it saves me so much space that I can play two players. I can play with two characters at the same time. And I have started to do so. This is cents worth of plastic, but these sorts of card trays would cost you a ton. They hook together. So useful. So as you can see, even if you're not into the fanciful things that 3D printer can make, you can probably find some accessories that will pay for your printer by themselves. Here's some 3D minis that I haven't peeled the supports off of yet. So if you are still here, thank you. And I'm gonna let you all in, you few who've stayed, on one of the biggest benefits of a 3D printer. It is an anti-FOMO device. I think that one of the big pushers of FOMO is that you want that little jolt you get from shopping and then buying. You know, as Chris George at Room and Board calls it, getting yourself a tasty little treat. I have found that when I want a new toy, I can go on Thingiverse, where every STL file is free, and I can print myself out a new mini, a new little accessory for pennies a piece, a new dice tower, and I get the shopping experience from that. And then once this thing prints up in, a few hours or maybe a whole day, or in this case, more than a day, I have myself that little jolt, and I didn't have to buy a super expensive game to get it. Is that necessarily the most emotionally healthy? Maybe I should look inside as to why I need those hits of dopamine. Yeah, okay, sure. I'll do that. And also, I'm going to print myself some little toys when I really get a craving for it. So anyway, this is my intro into using 3D printing to enhance your game experience and actually save yourself money. I hope that you enjoyed it. I also hope that you have a great rest of your day and keep playing solo.